DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got a very special guest. I've got Kerry Cunningham, and we're going to be talking about a report that he's the author of that's come out from Sixth Sense, who he works for, about buying and buying teams and how people buy. It kind of reminds me of the report that came out probably 9-10 years ago from CEB Gartner. And this is like the update to it. So before we get in, Kerry, where can people find you?
Sure. So you can find me at in all of the stuff that we're writing, the report and everything, at sixthsense.com/research, and that'll just get you to all of our stuff. And then on LinkedIn, of course, Kerry Cunningham on LinkedIn, and there aren't that many of them. I'm pretty easy to find.
And I was saying before we came live was that I've got the report as a tab on my browser, because it's so detailed. I have to keep going back to it and then reading a bit more, and then I get something else out of it. So talk us through the report and how you came up with it.
Yeah. So a little bit of my backstory is that I'm a former analyst for SiriusDecisions, first and foremost, for about 6 years, and then Forrester after Forrester acquired SiriusDecisions. So 8 years total in that role. I have the same job now. It's just for a software company, which is pretty cool. So in that SiriusDecisions, one of the research projects SiriusDecisions did every other year was a study of B2B buyers. And frankly, it was good. Our clients loved it. But I thought it was missing a couple of things, and I couldn't wait to get to Sixth Sense and redo it myself, which is what I did. And so what we did was we surveyed 936 folks who had recently been involved in a B2B purchase, and the qualification was 10,000 annual value or more. And we asked them a bunch of questions about their buying process. And you could sum up the most important top level findings in a few different numbers. This is like a combination for a lock to unlock B2B. So the first one is that the buying process consists 70% of buying teams doing their own research, talking to themselves and others, but not to salespeople. So they talk to sellers at 70% of the way through the journey. And that number is so consistent that we called it the point of first contact constant. It's true of everybody who says they're involved in a purchase. It's true of every kind of purchase. Buyers spend most of their time on their own researching. That's not a particularly new number, as you mentioned. Gartner and others have had different numbers over time.
Gartner's had 50, was it? I can't remember, 52, 57%.
Yeah. So that kind of number has been around for a while and not particularly newsworthy by itself. But the thing that we dove into was why. So why is it 70%? What's going on that people who are members of buying teams don't want to talk to anybody until they get that far through their journey? And, I think we came up with some of the answers to that question. So the first way that we got to the answer of that is we asked, when you did have that first contact with sellers, did you initiate that contact, or was that initiated by sellers? So if it's so consistent, you would assume it must be the buyer making the decision about when to engage. And that's exactly what we found. 83% of the time, buyers said that they initiated contact. So that means if you're pinging them and they happen to be halfway through their journey, if they fill out a form to see content and you call them and they're 50% of the way through the journey, they're just going to ignore you until you get to 83%. We looked at the other 17%, the 17% who said their interaction started because they got an email or a phone call. That also happened 70% of the way through the journey. So your efforts actually don't change when a buyer engages, period. So anything you've ever heard about a buyer being in control, 100%.
So even so we there's this balance, I think, certainly in the debate out in the world of sales, which is there's inbound and there's outbound. And I think the view is that sales will say, well, we're in control of the process because we're a fully outbound organization, and therefore we will find and uncover opportunity. We don't wait for inbound or whatever so what's the impact there?
Well, the impact is if you do that outbound right, and right means, one, you're outbounding into a set of accounts that you already know are in market.
Right.
Now, that would have been science fiction 5 or 6 years ago. It's absolutely possible now. You need to know which accounts are demonstrating some signals that they're in market and focus on the ones that are. So if you do that, you've eliminated 90% of the accounts in your TAM. You're focused on a very small set. Now you're fishing in the right pond. Now, I think instead of just going and asking for meetings, and what the buyers have said is they're going to ignore you. They're not going to take your meetings. And if the only thing you're doing is calling and saying, hi, I'd like to give you a demo, they're just going to blow you off. But if what you're doing is you're calling and emailing and say, hey, we have this great resource that might be of use to you in your buying process, or we have a customer so-and-so who looks a lot like you, and we'd love to have you talk to that person or talk to somebody from their team. Or we have a community that we sponsor of people who work in your role, and we'd love you to be part of that, right? Anything that you can do to enable that buyer both to progress in their decision-making process, but also to think, wow, these guys are awesome, that you should be doing. And I think really good salespeople do that anyway, right? Really good salespeople know it can't be just about me getting a demo.
Yep.
So there's a lot of work for sales to be done during that period of time. But I think one of the mind shifts has to happen is when they don't call you back and when they don't email you back, it doesn't mean that they're ignoring you or out of market. It means that they're in their buying process and not ready to engage with you. And then the next number in that series, so we got 70, 83, and the next one's 84. So 84% of the time, buyers said that when they initiated that first contact, it was with the vendor that ultimately won the business. And so if we think about that, there's two possible explanations for that. One is, and I'm going to obviously set this up as a straw man because I don't think this is the one. But one is that you've got a 10-person buying team on average who's gone through 8 out of 11 months of an average B2B buying cycle. And they get to that 8th month and they've got a list of companies that they think are on their list, and they pick one at random. They engage with them. And that first conversation that they happen to have is so compelling that 84% of the time they buy from that company.
Right.
So that's explanation one, possibility one. The other one is they took all of that time and spent all of that time researching because it took them that long to get a short list together, to prioritize that short list, put a vendor on top, and that's where they start.
Okay, because I would have thought that they would have come up with a short list of 3 or 5 and actually said, we want company 1 to win, and then and it's theirs to lose. So we'll contact them.
100%. Yeah, I think that's the only reasonable explanation, right? The first one, I just don't think is plausible. The second explanation they gave, the one that you're supporting there, I think that's the answer. It takes them that long to decide what they actually want. And then from that point forward, when they're engaging you, you've still got 30% of the buying process left, but that part of the buying process is confirming the decision that they've already made.
Yeah. Because I've done it when I've bought cars. I knew which car I wanted to buy.
Yeah.
And the other two were just in the running on the basis that the car that there wasn't one available, or I didn't like the salesperson, or whatever it was.
Right. And in our consumer lives, if it's a really considered purchase, you probably do put a couple of things in play and make sure that you do your due diligence. But there's a lot less pressure to do that than there is in business, where you're compelled by your company to consider.
It is. I use a car because it's a considered purchase. It's quite like B2B, where BMW is a client of ours, and they say that whenever a person comes through the showroom door, they'll actually know more than the salesperson.
Right.
So going back to your point, so when a business makes contact, that would generally be seen now as a marketing qualified lead in MQL.
Right. Yeah. So and the kind of contact we're talking about here is like contact me, demo request, demo downloads, those kinds of things. Anything where the buyer's actually saying, look, I actually want to talk to you. Now, if you have a lot of forms on your website and people have to get through the form to see content, then you're going to have people fill out forms. They're not saying contact me. They're saying I can't get to your content unless I fill out a form.
Right.
Those folks are going to ignore you until they get to the 70% point. And you can chase them all you want. If they had to fill out that form on day 2 of their buyer journey, you're going to be chasing them for an average of 8 months before and you're going to think this thing is dead. This thing was just starting, but you made them fill out a form. So, the 70, 83, 84, that's the most important set of numbers. There are a couple more. One that completely validates the 70, 30, 84, 70, 83, 84 is 78. So buyers said that they had completely or mostly set their requirements 78% of the time by the time they had the first conversation with sales. So even if you win the deal, you don't get to shape it. They've decided what they want and who they want to get it from. So for me, that's just super clear. It takes that long for buyers to decide. That's why it's 70%. You have got to make the sale prior to the time they talk to you. And that doesn't mean sitting back and hoping they read all your content. It certainly means making sure they can get to everything that they need without friction, without difficulty, without filling out forms. If you make people fill out forms, most of them will not. I know I'm going way too many numbers now, but another stat, we asked buyers, did you fill out a form to look at content on the vendor website that you bought from? 30% of buying team members filled out a form. So you're going to have 10 people on average from a buying team who all go to your website, every one of them. Only 3 of them are going to fill out forms. So a question I would ask for marketers is, do you notice when that happens? Because it's a big deal. If 3 people fill out your form. So if you don't,
organization,
if you don't notice when that's happening, you got to fix that. But 2, if only 1 person from an organization, no matter how good it is, has filled out a form with you in the last couple of months, that's a great sign that they're not buying from you or probably anybody else anytime soon. And that's just 1 person who's curious, right? So that's, to me, there's so much evidence that what you really need to be doing is making sure that everybody who is involved in buying something from you can get everything they need from you or from somebody else without friction, right? That just don't have to look for it. And then your job during the time where they're not wanting to have a demo and all of that, your job is to make sure that they have access to every resource. And you can be very proactive about that. We didn't hear anything from buyers that said, no, don't tell me about your stuff. Tell them about your stuff. Make sure that they have access to it, including make sure they have access to your happy customers. They love, buyers love talking. They love talking to other customers. They like references. They like communities. They don't want to talk to you because they don't want to be sold.
And do you think there's, because there's a lot of talk about things going on within the dark funnel, which is WhatsApp groups. There may be an industry WhatsApp group or communities or stuff like that. And do you have any evidence of that at all?
Yeah, so we did ask about, do you get information from peers, colleagues, those kinds of things? And it's one of the better rated sources. And what we found is that all of the sources were kind of, everybody likes the sources sort of, but they're obviously you're not going to be a direct source as a seller prior to the time that they actually make a decision. So you have to have enabled your buyers with those other sources, and they love human other sources. One of the things that I emphasize, one of the things that Sixth Sense does really well, we sponsor communities. Right? Sixth Sense is the way that CMOs in B2B get to know each other. We sponsor a CMO community that's got 500 people or something like that go to it. Now, we don't sell at that. We don't do anything except sponsor it. But
I was reading a book about it actually just recently.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And because you do it with I can't remember the guy, but yes, the person who wrote the book about communities says it's used that as the Sixth Sense community as an example. Yeah.
Yep. And we do the same thing for the BDRs. So it's just every company, every B2B company can do something like that. We have such a direct connection. We have a CMO community, and that's who buys our stuff, right? That's easy. But every company has communities of practitioners who use their solutions. And to the extent that you can support those people and provide a place where they not only feel community, but they learn from each other, they network, and they do those kinds of things, that puts you in the position of being a valued resource prior to when your buyers need to buy. And I think
just to say, that's the book that mentions your community.
Oh, great. That's really cool. Very, very cool. Fair is right. Yeah. So to me, there's so many things that we can actively be doing to help buyers not only make decisions, but to help them prefer you when they do. But it can't be just the old fashioned, hey, let me give you a demo. Even things like, so I've done, and this is a fun part of my job, but I've done 3 virtual wine tastings in the last 5-6 weeks.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. We know who the prospects are who are really in market. And so for that small set of prospects, if we don't know their CMO, we don't have a relationship with their VP of demand or somebody like that, guess what? They're going to get an invitation to a cool event, whether it's a wine tasting or it's a dinner or some other thing, because we know that they're in market. And because of that, we're able to spend a lot more money on that particular prospect because we're not doing it with everybody else, and make sure that we get to start a relationship with them. And even in an event like that, we're not pitching. There's zero pitch. It might be me talking about the research. It might be somebody else talking about something else, a third party, but it's a place for them to network. It's a place to learn something, but we provide it.
So Stanley says, if I had spent all that time to study what I want, the first company I'm going to ring is the company that fits the spot best, not the ones that have the missing parts to get the price. And he also says, forms before product equals you really want to market to spam me. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right.
But you could be in a situation where someone fills in a form, and then you've got a BDR ringing them up, and then they say, go away. And then the BDR says, well, the MQLs are rubbish.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think that's probably the majority of the MQLs. When you think about B2B websites and who's on your website to look at your content, we know that there's a ton of junk, and that junk is largely there's bots. You have some competitors, you have students and other kinds of folks. That group is probably pretty small. Then you've got this vast 30-40% of your web traffic that is probably from companies that you could sell to, but certainly from the people in those companies who have an interest in your solutions, because they're not there to look at your videos. They're not there because your graphics are so stunning, right? So those are the right kind of people by definition. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there. And then the question is, are they part of companies that are in a buying process? And we know from our research and others that the number of companies in any given addressable market that's in market, 5 to 10% max. So the likelihood that somebody who came to your website and filled out a form to see your content is part of an active buying team is very small. The likelihood that there's somebody that you want to have a relationship with is very high, right? They're probably the right kind of people. They're not in market. So what should you do? Leave them alone. Give them everything they want, expose them to all of your content, help them fall in love with your brand and your solutions and all of that, and leave them the hell alone, right? Until they're part of a buying team. Everybody says, so how am I going to know? Who am I going to call? Well, it's been wrong to be calling all of those people in the first place. That's been a way. If you're a BDR, SDR, sales rep, that's been such a huge waste of your time, and you know it, right? That's been terrible. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to point you at the accounts that are demonstrating the most interest of being in market, and we're going to find out who those people are, and then you're going to be prospecting into those accounts.
So does the amount of content that person consumes, is that relevant?
Not even a little bit. Yeah, because most B2B websites only offer a pretty finite amount of content in the first place. So everybody who demonstrates some interest is going to demonstrate more or less the same level of interest because there's a cap on it for most organizations. We've never seen, and this goes back to SiriusDecisions, I've never seen a statistical relationship between the amount of content one person consumes and what their company does. That's just not It's not a thing. But if you look at what two people from the same company do at the same time, that's much less likely to be noise. And if you look at three and so on, like the more people you can see from that company who are consuming your content, the better. And that's the much, much better signal to be looking at. And Marketo and Eloqua have hidden that from us in HubSpot for a generation.
Stanley makes another comment, which is that personal touch works because we like to help each other, people by people. Kerry, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Remind people, where, first and foremost, where can they get the research?
So if you go to sixthsense.com/research, you'll see this and all of the other reports. And you can also just check out my my profile on LinkedIn, and you'll see lots of commentary about that. Plus, we've got lots and lots of other research that we've been publishing as well.
Excellent. Kerry, thank you so much for coming on today. The 20 minutes goes.
Thanks for having me. Really, really appreciate it.
I could get the report out and talk to you further, but we were
happy to come back.